Yes, yes. Thank you very, very much for the introduction this morning. And I have a very, very busy program ahead. In fact, I'm going to say things twice a lot today. How's that? How's that? All right, let's break out of that. Just very quickly, coming up in the next hour, Twin Falls Mayor Don Hall is scheduled to join us. You can hit him with all of your exciting questions about snow removal. All right. Well, we didn't have a lot of that to worry about, but he will be here and he'll be talking a bit about city government, and he will be available to take some telephone calls, I'm sure, as well. Any concerns you may have that he can then return and share with fellow council members at another meeting coming up next week. So that's on the way just after the news at 9 o'clock this morning. A couple of other things we're going to be talking about as well. Tomorrow in Boise, about 2 p.m. I think it is, there is a big rally being put together by sportsmen from across Idaho. And these people are just livid about the fact that the federal government owns 2/3 of the property in the state. And they think it's time for the feds to pack up and go home and just get the heck out of the area. And that we can manage this quite well on our own without that intrusion from Washington, which, if you actually pull out your slide rule, you'll notice is quite a distance away. And they may not really have as good an idea of what takes place here as local folks. That's coming up a little bit later in this hour as well. And then I had another thing I just wanted to mention very quickly at the top of the show. I was packing my lunch for today last night when I started getting text messages from friends. And these friends were sharing with me a couple of big stories that just dropped within an hour of each other last night. And yeah, they're related because they involve two men who actually have a very good friendship. If you've not yet heard, because I think that every media outfit in the world picked up on it, because especially among the fellow travelers in media, they absolutely love The Daily Show on Comedy Central, and they absolutely love the host of that show, and that is the left-leaning Jon Stewart. Although Stewart will actually knock on everyone. I mean, he's an equal opportunity basher sometimes. I say sometimes because generally his own worldview gets in the way of most of what he happens to do, but he announced last night that he's going to be leaving the show. He's been with it. Been on the air at Comedy Central since, I believe, 1999 or 2000, which for we old-timers doesn't seem like a long time ago, but for a lot of people who've grown up on Jon Stewart, it might seem like most of their lives. And many of those younger people, it's the only source of information they get about daily news, which means it's somewhat skewed, and it gives them an impression that, well, probably correctly so, that there are a lot of fools in government. However, the show is going to be looking for a replacement. It had, of course, another host before Jon Stewart came along. But no one seems to remember that guy. He ended up as a sidekick somewhere else on another program and then just gradually faded away and gone, kaput. But Stewart made the show his own. Stewart used to vacation when he was a college student, summers, in a home in Dewey Beach on the Atlantic Ocean, get this, with a fellow by the name of Anthony Weiner. Yeah, the two of them were young college students at the time. And when that scandal broke, I'll put it this way, for a guy who knew Weiner as a personal friend and as a fellow traveler, he didn't spare him, which was a good thing. So Stewart is stepping down. Within that same hour that news broke last night, NBC said it was suspending without pay the face of its news division, that is Brian Williams. He's going to be away for 6 months. He's not going to starve. He's been making $10 million a year simply reading the news off a prompter and making some editorial decisions about what stories fit in the news. Most of those coming also from the aspect of a fellow traveler. But Williams is going to be away for a long, long time. You know what NBC is trying to do. 6 months gives them an opportunity to hope that people forget about it, which I don't think is going to happen. But 6 months also assures them enough time to find a suitable replacement. You see, since they didn't have a succession plan in place, this is what they're left with. They have to scramble. So for 6 months, they're going to hope that it goes away. But if it doesn't, they hope that they can find someone else to step in and fill the shoes of Brian Williams, who at age 55 could well have been with that broadcast for another 20 years if he didn't have a problem fabricating stories. And he's been suspended simply for fabricating a story after the fact about being fired on during the Iraqi war a dozen years ago. NBC hasn't even made a decision yet on all of the other potential fabrications that he was involved in. Now, as these two stories broke last night, there was an interesting, what they call in the modern age, a meme that was taking place online. And people were saying that both Brian Williams and Jon Stewart should just simply switch jobs. And a writer at the Washington Post by the name of Terrence McCoy, we'll get this out. We'll get that out. Terrence McCoy, writing today, and says that a great many people in media believe it makes sense. 12 minutes after 8 o'clock, Bill Colley with you. On top story today, 29. What happened to all of the warm weather? Well, it's going to come back, but it will come back only a little bit slowly. By tomorrow morning, things will be much warmer. We guarantee that because, of course, the weather forecast is always right, at least in the short term. I can tell you what the weather's going to be in an hour, but don't ask me in a week. Weather forecasters have a better, I think, the 90% success rate with what they do, and yet you've got people who complain but will go to a casino and figure they're going to come away with a bundle. Or play the lottery and figure they're going to come away with a bundle. I think that the weatherman is usually, or in some cases, the weather woman is usually more trustworthy than, let's say, gambling with all of your life savings, which many people do have a tendency to do. So we've got the possibility that these two clowns may switch positions. One of them, Stuart, who I'm told has an actual news background going back some years, that Jon Stewart, before he actually got into comedy, had actually been a serious newsman. And now that he's done comedy for 15 or 20 years, feels a need to go back and do serious news again. And since the younger demographic knows him far better than they do Brian Williams, some marketing people, not news people, but some marketing people are saying he would be the right choice to anchor NBC Nightly News. He couldn't make the faces, and they couldn't do all of the wisecracks, and he couldn't use the dirty words, but that he would like to do something like that. Williams, on the other hand, who really enjoys being in the spotlight and yucking it up, and he's already fabricated the news for many, many years, he might be the perfect guy to do a comedy show about news. Makes sense, doesn't it? At least to the people who are arguing the case, because Brian Williams has a lot of friends, fellow travelers in media, who think that we're just piling on at this point, and that we should forgive him for telling lies, because apparently most of the American journalists backing him up do the same thing. It's the only thing I can think of that's taking place. You can reach our program this morning. The telephone number, if you'd like to chat on the program with us, is 736-0300. Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning. News Radio 1310 KLIX, newsradio13.com. 1310, I got to get all of these numbers in here this morning. Either I'm saying things twice or I'm omitting them. Early onset dementia, I'm sure, is taking over my life. It happens every time I try to go outside and I'll lock myself out. Yeah, you know how that is. We have a caller with us, and you're up next. Good morning. What's on your mind?
Yes, Bill, I just was wondering why it's so important that we hold Brian Williams to a standard that we have never held our president to, because he lies virtually every day, it seems. I don't know, but it's unbelievable. Why is the difference? Are we aware of one and not the other? And I realize the media pushes one and not the other, but not necessarily. So just a question. I just was wondering what you thought.
Oh, and I thank you for the question this morning. And just off the bat, the president yesterday denied one of his former, David Axelrod, who used to work, and I thank you much for the telephone call. David Axelrod was one of two people who worked for President Obama. I believe the other's name was Pfeiffer. And before they went to work for President Obama, they used to actually work for presidential campaigns, political campaigns in Central America, in the banana republics. In other words, helping create cults of personality for dictators. And Mr. Obama so admired that he hired them to be his political guys in 2008. And Pfeiffer quit a few years ago. Axelrod stayed around for much longer and finally walked away from the job. Axelrod has now written a book where he says President Obama simply lied to the American people about his feelings about same-sex marriage. In 2008, President Obama was going around the country saying, marriage is a sacred vow and bond between a man and a woman. And if you want a civil union, you go right ahead. But I don't believe in marriage for same-sex couples. And apparently in the background, though, while he was saying one thing to try and entice voters, like many politicians, he was wetting an index finger, putting it up into the air and seeing which way the wind was blowing. And he told Axelrod swears on this, that President Obama said, I am not opposed to same-sex marriage. I simply have to pretend I am in order to get myself elected president. Because public opinion at the time was vastly opposed to same-sex marriage. Mr. Obama is now trying to, as they say in media, trying to walk this back, claiming that he thought that civil unions were enough, that same-sex marriage wasn't necessary. But he says when people were getting their feelings hurt because they couldn't get married, it changed his mind. Because you don't want someone to walk around with hurt feelings. So as president of the United States, he's got to make everybody feel good. He said that led him to change his mind, and he disputes what has been said by the fellow who helped create the cult of personality, the fellow who used to work in the banana republics. And you may remember in 2008, Mr. Obama was saying he was going to dismantle NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. But at the same time, he was telling people in the Canadian government, psst, not really. I'm just making it up to win votes of working people. But don't worry, I have no intention otherwise. So you've got Mr. Obama lying. You got Hillary Clinton saying she was under fire or lying. Yeah, and the two of them have not been suspended for 6 months without pay, where Brian Williams has. You're next at 8:18 on, well, we'll call it Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX. What's up with you?
Yes. I'm just going to kind of express my opinion. Of course, lying is not a good thing, but I think Brian Williams is one of the best in what he does. And sure, he messed up, but we've got a lot of mess-ups right in our own city of Twin Falls. And I speak of this new project that's going in downtown for the city officials and all that, spending our money like it was just, well, kind of like Obama does. Just the fact that the city don't have that kind of money, and grants this and loans this.
But as I understand it, the city actually decided to go with a smaller building than the much larger building in order to try at least and save some money.
Why, they need a new building, period.
Because they're working out of a place that in 1940 was probably perfect for the size of the city, but doesn't seem to be any longer.
Yeah, well, kind of in this day and age with homeless people, with, the economy the way it is, hey, sacrifice a little bit.
Well, and I guess you're right. Maybe police officers can do their jobs with other police officers sitting on their laps, although could lead to a few of those charges of sexual harassment. The place is very crowded, I understand that, and maybe the council could hold their meetings outside, maybe over in the band shell or something like that. It could be a little rough on some cold days, but we've all been there. I do thank her for the telephone call. Don Hall will be along with us, in fact, in about an hour, a little under an hour now, and perhaps we can have some conversations with him about any number of things related to city government. As far as Brian Williams, all right, he may be a nice guy. He tells tall tales. He's a raconteur. Lots of people do that. But there are 330 million people in America. You can't tell me they can't find some other guy who can read the teleprompter well? Come on. 20 minutes now after 8 o'clock. Big rally coming up in Boise tomorrow. More details just ahead. I think that a lot of people who tune into the show on a regular basis do understand that a lot of the discussion it involves the fact that both federal and state governments have gotten so large in many cases that we've really lost track of the whole notion of our own self-reliance and things that we could do on our own. And I've always remembered, years ago I used to talk to farmers about various issues, and they used to tell me the government comes in and tells us we've got to do all of this because we would otherwise exploit the land to the point where it wouldn't be worth it any longer. And they said, well, it's cutting our own throats. We know a little bit about conservation efforts and the like. Tomorrow there is a rally that is planned at the state capitol, and some of the folks involved, these are mainly sportsmen, are going to be gathering, and they've got some issues with federal control of various lands. It's not just federal control, though. We're joined this morning by Greg McReynolds. He's with Trout Unlimited. First of all, welcome to our program, sir.
Thanks so much for having me, Bill. I appreciate it.
Sure. 8:25 at our show right now, and of course 29 our temperature. And you're listening to News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Bill Colley with Top Story. First of all, to begin with, you were talking with me off the air about the fact that it's not just federal government you folks are really worried about. It's the fact that the state could step in and say, all right, we'll take over, but that it's really just exchanging one master for another.
Yeah, what we're really concerned about, Bill, is loss of access to our public lands. A lot of hunters and anglers around Idaho, in fact, the great majority, rely on these Forest Service and BLM properties for their hunting and fishing opportunities. It's not just Idahoans either. I mean, it's people from all over the country who come here to hunt and fish. It's part of a big industry. And the state is pitching this concept that they should take over our Forest Service and BLM lands. And that's just not a feasible concept. I mean, for one thing, the Attorney General has already told the legislature that they don't have any legal ground to stand on, and that it's, the process is doomed to failure legally. The second and more concerning part is, if the state actually did get control of those lands, the result would be sale. We would lose access to those places because the state would simply be forced to sell them. Right now, Idaho is sold off about 30% of our state lands. So those are lands that used to be in the public domain that aren't anymore, that hunters and fishers can't access. So we're pretty concerned about this. The legislature had an interim committee that took testimony from around the state and had a lot of hunters and anglers say, hey, we don't want to see a loss of access to our Forest Service and BLM lands. They put together a report that they just issued a couple of weeks back. It's called the Federal Interim Lands Committee Report, and they recommended spending $500,000 to look at this. And to me, that's just nonsensical. The Attorney General's already told them that it's a bad idea, and the state just doesn't have the budget or the means to do this.
Is it a question I guess I would have? Are they well-meaning, or is it just perhaps they have not heard enough in the way of testimony and heard enough from their constituents, and maybe someone needs to better enlighten them?
And that's exactly what we're going to do tomorrow, Bill. We're gonna go up to the Capitol. Sportsmen from around the state are going to gather, and we're really lucky. I heard you talking about the weather. We're going to have a great day in Boise tomorrow. We're going to stand on the steps and unite as sportsmen and say, hey, we really care about our public lands. We don't want to see them sold. We don't want to lose access to the places where we hunt, fish, camp, ride our ATVs, take our families. These lands are important to us, really important, and we're not going to stand for anyone who says that they're going to take them away from us. So I'm really looking forward to tomorrow. I think we're going to have a great event. I would encourage people who hunt and fish, who use public lands, to come out. It's going to be a good day.
Now, you're meeting at 2 o'clock, or the rally is at 2 o'clock?
We're meeting at noon.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to meet at noon, but we're going to hang out afterwards. We're going to be at Capitol Park across the street for a few hours afterwards. So, but the main event is right at noon on the Capitol step.
Now, for people who might like to know more about it, online, where would you send them? What could they do? Because I'm sure that there may be people, if they get some time tomorrow, would like to join you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can look up Trout Unlimited. You can look on our website. You can look up Backcountry Hunters and Backcountry Hunters and Anglers on their website. The Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, or I'm sure I can probably tweet you and send you some information. And people are also welcome to call me. I'm pretty easy to find. My email and phone number are publicly available. So anybody with questions or thoughts is welcome to call me or email me anytime. And
just the rally itself, I'm sure you have some allies that they may not be many, but you have some allies, and perhaps they're spreading the word too among fellow legislators, and you might get more of a hearing this way.
Well, the legislature's still trying to decide what they're going to do. So the interim committee has issued their report, and the legislature has not yet planned legislation. So what we're doing is we're trying to get on the front end of that and encourage the legislature not to introduce a bill on this. There's better ways to go about this. We know as hunters and anglers that management's not perfect, and we know there's lots of things we could do better on our public lands. And we actually have experience working on that, and I know a lot of Idahoans do, working on things through collaborative process, through trying to find ways to manage land better. And that would be a much more worthwhile investment for Idaho taxpayers, and particularly for Idaho hunters and anglers, is if the legislature wanted to look at how to
Greg,
engage better in the process.
I got to let you on at that point because I've got a hard break coming up, but I wish you great luck tomorrow. Thanks a lot for joining us today, too, on air. I have another guest joining us this morning, this one in the studio. First of all, I didn't get a chance because we really came up tight against the last break to thank Greg McReynolds for joining us. They've got a very exciting event going on tomorrow, as he points out, at the state capitol. And if you've got some time off and you're a sportsman and you've got some interest in an event like that, I would highly recommend, it's a short drive when you really think about it, especially when you have an 85-mile-per-hour speed limit, to get there and join in. So I just want to say thanks again to Greg for spending some time with us. And if we get a chance, maybe we'll drop by too and visit with them tomorrow. Also wanted to mention Western States Bus Services is hiring part-time bus drivers right now. Split shifts, 5 days per week, summers off and scheduled, no school days. Pay is $10.75 per hour. Apply today by contacting 733-8003. Western States Bus Services is an equal opportunity employer. And my shift was a little different. Later in the day, maybe I take them up on that. I have a great guest in studio with us. First of all, Jeff Schroeder is joining us from the Jerome Food Bank. And I've got that part of it right.
Food ministry.
Food ministry.
Yes.
And but it essentially operates much like a food bank.
Well, we have a a pantry, a kitchen, and a garden. It's a food ministry. We try to complete the whole as much as we can, all focused on food.
And we should point out that these are overtaxed nationwide. I mean, I've talked to people, my sister's church and the like, they have one available too in their community. And it seems that the last 20 years, it's not just the recession, but the last 20 years, we've seen a huge spike in demand. Do want to mention 30 at our studios, 8:35 on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Top story with Bill Colley. Jeff, the fact of the matter is, you have to constantly appeal to the public for assistance in these matters.
Yes, it's food. We're supported by the Idaho Food Bank and South Central Community Action. We get our food from there, but we still have utilities to pay. We still have other items that have to be taken care of to help support bringing the food to the people. And as far as the need has increased. We have seen people that are holding two jobs and still aren't able to really get down to the end of the month, make a choice between medical expenses or feeding. And we've seen a great increase in children too, the need for children. So it's not just the people that have made poor choices, it's the people that are trying to work hard. So we've seen a real increase. In fact, almost an 80% increase this year. Part of that through our food pantry. Part of that is because our pantry is only 3 years old. And the awareness is out there. More people are coming a little bit more. They know that we're there. So we still have a great need for additional funds besides just the food. And that's why we're holding our dinner auction. And I'd like to invite you and your listeners to come help support this cause and have a good meal at the same time.
And that's coming up very soon.
Yes, it is. Not this Saturday, but the following Saturday, February 21st. We will open our doors at 5:30 and we start serving dinner at 6, and then it's followed by a dinner auction where we'll have a live auction. We have a 1989 Ford 3/4-ton utility truck that's been donated. We have some firearms that are going to be there, raffled as well as live auction. We have a lamb and a pig on the hoof with the processing paid for too, so you can participate in the auction there, as well as, if I didn't mention, Mill Iron Dutch Oven Catering is going to be there, so we're going to have a good meal for you. Pork loin that's going to Dutch oven cooked, and we're going to highlight this. We're kind of calling this also Holly's Fish Follies. We had a great supporter that put in almost 20 years in this ministry for us that passed away 4 years ago. And we would like to honor him as well as others that have been there. So that's why we're calling it the Holly's Fish Follies. So it's just to remember some of those people that are in the background all the time, giving of their time just to help. And we're asking listeners or whoever's up in Jerome on the 21st to come by and just have a good meal and help support the cause.
What's the cost at the door if someone just walks in?
$12.
Can you buy tickets in advance?
You can, but it's okay just to be there at the door. It's probably better just to show up. It's at the St. Jerome Catholic Church in Jerome. It's on 2nd Avenue. And again, at the door, tickets would be fine. We hope to start the auction by 7:15. So it shouldn't be a long night, good meal, and supporting a good cause and helping. And unfortunately, Jerome, we could use the extra help up there with a little bit of dollars to help feed the people of the community.
Got about a minute left before the break, and I think we were going to take a caller, but I think the caller has decided to maybe just hold off on the question for the time being. But I will note that when I first moved here, I was looking at a place to stay in Jerome, and I checked out the median family income. And I'll tell you what, if you've got a couple of kids, I don't know how these people are making it.
Yes, it's difficult there, and there's the elderly also that are there, the people that can't get out, but the children, we've seen the biggest growth there. And we just recently, City of Jerome has put in a skate park, which is not far from us, so we really encourage, and a lot of those children come over and get a good meal for us. Monday through Wednesday, we serve food at the for a dinner, a nice, warm, nutritious dinner at 5:30 Monday and Wednesday. And then Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we have our pantry open where anybody can come by and just pick up some food.
All right. Jeff Schroeder, I want to thank you for coming by this morning.
Appreciate your time.
Good meeting you, and I really wish you great luck, too, on the 21st.
Thank you, sir.
All right, super. About 9 o'clock this morning, right after the news, we're going to be joined by the mayor of Twin Falls, Idaho, Don Hall, in studio with us. He'll be spending a few minutes, and he might take some of your telephone calls as well. Don't go away. That's ahead. Oh, music from Sir Paul McCartney. You know, he was at the Super Bowl a few weeks ago. This is from his band called Wings. I can remember being a kid. We were in the latter part of grade school, and summer days we'd go across the street to the neighbor's house, and we'd have the radio on. And back then, AM radio, you could hear these types of songs. This was Band on the Run, and then we would try to stand there and lip sync it. Well, yeah. Small town. There wasn't really a lot else to do in those that you could go down to the park and shoot a few hoops. And they had a recreation program, and you could go over there and make boondoggles. So lip syncing to Paul McCartney sometimes was actually considerably more exciting. I know that may seem hard to believe for a lot of people out there. I've got, as I mentioned earlier, a lot taking place today with people coming in and out of the studio and the like. And Twin Falls Mayor Don Hall scheduled to join us just after the news at 9 o'clock this morning, and he'll take some of your telephone calls too as well. I was talking with via email with him the other day, and I was suggesting that one thing we might start looking to do is as we move towards summer, Parks and Recreation, speaking of keeping kids active, Parks and Recreation always have something going on. And what we might do on these Wednesdays is actually be able to use that as somewhat of a board to sort of jump off with a lot of these different things going on, because a lot of times on a Saturday, if you're not going to the movies or shopping on a hot summer day and you're wondering, what can I do today, you may not be aware that some of these things are taking place. So this would give us an opportunity to share with people. I'm really excited about, I don't live very far away from where the band concerts are going to take place. And I'm really excited about that. When I was living on the eastern shore of the Chesapeake Bay, I used to drive to a little town called Berlin, Maryland. It's actually pronounced Berlin because it was named after a guy named Burl who opened an inn there, but it's spelled like the city that's the capital of Germany. And I used to go there on Sunday nights, and they would have these lovely concerts at this old museum, which was in an old colonial house. But out on the lawn, people would just put up their chairs, and you could sit there and listen. Great little town. It was the place where they filmed the movie The Runaway Bride, and also they filmed a movie there called Tuck Everlasting. You may remember the first one, maybe not the latter. The latter was a Disney movie of some sorts. But I think it was a lovely little place to go visit. And now I have an opportunity just to walk a few blocks and see something like that here in Twin Falls. I'm excited about that. Before we actually move on and talk about some city issues, I got a couple of other things I just quickly wanted to share with you. This couple of stories that I happened to see before I came into work today. And one is from the Washington Times and a writer by the name of Stephen Dinan. And the headline was this: Feds build bureaucracy to deal with Obama amnesty application onslaught. The government expects so many applicants for President Obama's new deportation amnesty that it's seeking a contractor. So somebody who apparently will have a low bid will get this job, but a contractor just to open the new mail and enter the forms into the system with plans to operate 2 shifts. Get this. From 6 a.m. until 11:30 p.m. every workday to keep up with the anticipated workload. All applications must be opened in the presence of 2 workers, one with secret security clearance, in order to maintain integrity. Wow. In other words, we don't want the public actually knowing how many people we're going to allow in the country. And mail may need to be x-rayed for security reasons, the documents show. The administration says it is confident in its ability to make a case-by-case decision on each application and says it expects half of the 3.85 million people eligible for the new amnesty to apply once the application period opens in the middle of May. Now, I've mentioned that. Meanwhile, in a related story, as they like to say when you're watching a newscast, this is from Neil Monroe at the Daily Caller. 2 immigrants for every new job since calendar year 2000. The United States has accepted 2 new immigrants for each additional job created since 2000, according to federal data. It shows that 18 million legal and illegal immigrants settled in the United States from 2000 to 2015, while only 9.3 million additional jobs were created. And you know what this does? It creates pressure to lower your wages, which is why food banks are busy places, which is why food ministries are scrambling to keep up, because people may still be working hard, but they're just not seeing the wage increases because of that competition. The working age population of Americans aged 16 to 65 also grew by 16 million from 2000 to 2014, according to one source who spoke to the Daily Caller. And there is another story today at the Wall Street Journal. This is, I kid you not, this just gets worse and worse and worse. From 1960 until 2000, the job growth in this country on a yearly basis was running at about 2%. And then for about 10 years following 2000, it dropped down to about 1%. It is now running at 0.5% per year. So the actual job growth in this country over the last 15 years has slowed to 1/4 of what it had been for the previous 40 years. And here you have a president of the United States and his minions and allies in the House and Senate, and really in many state houses across the country as well, who are saying, let's open up the floodgates and bring more people in. For what? There are no jobs. How can anybody out there take a look at this and say that this is in any way a commonsensical approach? How do you turn this country around? We have to have we keep hearing about the fact that, well, the worst of the recession is over, but the growth is so very, very slow. We need about 15 million new jobs just to get back to where we were before the collapse in 2007, 2008. And when we get to that point, 15 million new jobs could take us, we still have to, with the growth in population and all of the new people, Mr. Obama is simply going to wave a fig leaf and tell these people that they are now citizens. With all of that growth that's coming, we're going to need perhaps another 15 million new jobs. And right now, I think we've recovered about 3 million of the jobs we lost during the course of the last big recession, which for a lot of people never ended. You can reach me this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And simply put, can we ever fix this, or have we reached the point that I think the word is intractable? Has the problem gotten so bad that we might as well just write it all off? 736-0300, Bill Colley on Top Story this morning. Yes, Top Story. Top Story this morning, and you're up next, and you're joining me at 8:50. What's on your mind?
Bill, how come it's always somebody that you're picking up a pick against? I mean, it's always fear-mongering. Why don't you talk something positive for once? Thank you.
Well, the sun's going to be out a little bit the next couple of days. Does that help? Tell you what, bury your head in the sand. It'll all just go away. You'll get up in a few days, and you'll be surrounded by gold, 72 virgins, and that's somebody else's face. But you'll be just perfectly fine with all of that. For crying out loud, what do you think we're going to do here? We just sat here and talked very nicely to a couple of people in the last half hour about some projects they're doing for very good causes, we should point out. That's enough, isn't it? And then what? In other words, I'm a liberal and I don't like you talking about the president. And my family may be here because they came across in the dark of night, and I don't like you talking about that either. Yes, we understand exactly where your mindset is coming from. 8:51, 30 right now at our studios, and you're up next on Top Story. Good morning to you, and what's... Hello? Anybody home? Apparently not. Lights on, nobody home. Another one of those callers. See, that's the problem, is they get to the point where they cannot give you a logical answer, and then all of a sudden, we had that guy last week. Remember, he called in here, and then when he doesn't, he just shouts a lot. And if he doesn't get his way, he just keeps shouting louder, thinking that's how you win an argument. And then when he realizes that he's sinking fast, click. That I've been doing talk radio off and on now for 20 years, 4 different radio stations. Believe me, I'm used to it. You might as well. They're carbon copies. They're all over the country. You're up next, and you're on Top Story at 8:52 with Bill Colley.
Yes. I just think that when the radio station hired you, they had to be desperate. And I hope that you find another because you'll never take Kelly and Jill's place. You couldn't if you tried, and you're not trying very hard. The other guy was right. Do something positive, Betty.
Oh, okay. The sun will come up tomorrow. I will guarantee that, just like I told him as well. Kelly has really big shoes to fill, and I do admit that. It feels like Danny White filling in for Roger Staubach. You're up next at 8:53 with Bill Colley on News Radio 1310 KLIX. What's on your mind?
Well, good morning, Bill. I just want to let you know that I think you're doing a good job and everything's A-OK. There's a lot of people out there just want to, like you said, hide their head in the sand.
Well, they're called Democrats and liberals.
Exactly.
Yeah, and if they don't get their way, you've got National Public Radio, and I'm paying for that too. Socialized radio, you can always go listen to that and feel much more comfortable. And you're up next, and a good morning to you. You're on KLIX.
Hey, Bill. Good morning, and just keep up the good work, man. I'm telling you, these lefties are running scared, man. And we're going to keep pushing, and we're going to push them clear back to the caves they belong in. And I'll tell you what, I'm so sick of what they're doing to this country and this political correctness that I've had my belly full of it. So those guys can keep spouting all they want to, but we're going to defeat them because this country's greater than those people are. And I'm sorry I'm ranting, but, man, that's just the way I feel.
Hey, thank you. God bless you, brother.
Yeah, you too.
Good hearing from you. In fact, I was thinking about it when I was reading the other day, that newspaper editorial. The every other week in the Times News, there's an anti-gun screed by one of the editors there. And I was thinking, what they're really worried about is, for all of their tough talk, how they're going to take over the country and force all of us to bend to their will and really control everyone else. The fact of the matter is, they know that traditional Americans simply are going to say, hey, get out of my way. And traditional America is armed to the teeth. And Lefty out there would shoot his toes off if he ever tried to, respond. I don't think it's ever going to come to that in this country. But the fact of the matter is, someday we have to end the scourge of leftism and get back to what made the country a major success. You're up next. Good morning, and you're on Top Story with Bill Colley.
Good morning, Bill. I just want to back up what the last caller said. One thing we can do as small people, we can put bumper stickers on our car. I have seen very few bumper stickers around Twin Falls. I have my back end covered up saying how bad Obama is, and he's the worst president ever.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody else is doing any of that. That's a small thing, but it's something we as small people can do.
It's messaging. It's getting the word out at some point.
Exactly. Let them know that there's people out there that don't like Obama.
About 150 to 200 million of us, I think, at least.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for the call. Good hearing from you this morning. Coming up on 8:56:30 right now at our studios. Bill Colley with you on News Radio 1310 KLIX, newsradio1310.com. Let me tell you something. This show is calm compared to some of the shows I have done in the past. I used to have a regular caller at a radio show I did about 10, 12 years ago during that time frame. And he used to call up and his opening statement with every telephone call would be, and I'm quoting him, "Make the world a better place, punch a liberal in the face." We're not nearly so over the top as that here. We're not nearly so violent here. We're not nearly recommending anything so violent. We're just simply trying to point out to people that you're not getting most of the news you should be getting, and it makes the left mad when we start telling people the truth. You're up next, and you're on the air with Bill Colley on News Radio 1310 KLIX.
Good morning, Bill. This is the first time I called you since you come to Twin Falls, and glad to have you here.
Super, thank you.
The people, they complain on your radio station, things like that, about what our government's doing. Then we have people that we elect into office, and they don't support what they say they was when they was coming in here. I send out messages every day to all of our congressmen, senators, local, the state, and the federal, and tell them, do what you was voted in to do. Quit doing like Labrador did, sold us down the creek when they was trying to get Beaner out there.
Right.
And Labrador was one that, they needed 28. He was one of our people that could have been the 28th one. And that they need to just keep on the pressure to our elected officials, not only in this state, in all the states, to get rid of the crap they got there in our government.
And again, you've got too many people who want to get along and go along, and Raul is simply looking at his future, and he could be, a vice presidential choice, and he didn't want to rock the boat after all of his tough talk. Thank you much for the call, sir. Good hearing from you, too, as well. I'll just add this very quickly. Of course, we have the mayor of Twin Falls coming up in the next hour, going to be joining us just after the news at 9 o'clock from Fox. But let me add this quickly. If you believe that, for the people who objected to what I had to say, if you believe that we should have fewer and fewer and fewer jobs for Americans and have hungrier and hungrier and hungrier Americans, then you're the ones with a problem, not me. And you're not doing anything for our future. 8:59, news is coming up next. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com, 30 at our studios. Very special guest joining me in studio, and of course he's familiar with the studio here, and I've met Mayor Don Hall before from Twin Falls, and had an opportunity to have a conversation with him about the first week that I arrived in town, week of January, in fact it was. Hard to believe that here we are in mid-February practically, and it all still feels new to me. On the other hand, it's fairly routine for him. You're listening to Top Story, and this is Bill Colley, and the station is News Radio 1310 KLIX, along with newsradio1310.com. And first of all, welcome back.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Bill.
I was going to say we had a lengthy conversation one day over coffee, just about some issues related to the city and the like, and gave me sort of an opportunity to get familiar with just various issues and some of the lay of the land too as well. And we actually met downtown in an area of the city that really has been, I guess it's been a project, but it's really been turning around considerably. We met at a little spot on Main Street, and
we went to the Twin Bean.
Doing some great business there.
Doing great business. Yeah, downtown is really... it's an exciting time for downtown. We've had businesses move down there, like the Glambias and others that Glambia put their headquarters down there, and the hospital put their billing department down there, and we've had brand new businesses opening up all the way up and down Main Street, and it's really an exciting time, and we are so blessed that our downtown is still there. A lot of cities, their downtown through becoming dilapidated or have been removed, and we have our core there. The buildings that were built in the teens and the 20s and the 50s, and they're all still there. We went through kind of a challenging phase in the 70s when we put a bunch of facades on these buildings. Okay, but it was the 70s, and I'm a 70s child, so I remember that. It probably wasn't the best time, but we're going back to our roots. And for example, the Orpheum, the theater is opening up under a couple very brave folks that have purchased it, and they're going to be offering theater and movies, and it's just so historic, and it's a great thing for our community.
I was going to say, when you think about the growth that has taken place on one side of the city, which has really become, at least for grocery shopping or clothing shopping, has become sort of the center for all of that. It's almost like two separate entities in one city, yet the downtown in many cities I've seen usually dies when that happens. Not happened here.
Well, it went through some difficult times, no doubt. A lot of our staple businesses, the Ropers, the Parises, those they went by the byway when we had the Magic Valley Mall move in. Of course, before that we had the Blue Lakes Mall, and those take away from your downtown. I mean, they're phases. But I'm here to tell you that our downtown is growing, it's vibrant, along with the Magic Valley Mall is growing and vibrant. Our community is in a pretty good place, pretty exciting time.
We've seen a population spike of what, 10 or 12,000 in just 15 years?
Yeah, it's we're probably sitting at about 45, 48 between there right now, and we're going to see that continual growth and in this area. That's all the studies tell us. The Snake River Plain, where we live here is going to grow in the future. Now, it's up to us to make sure that it grows in a way that our community wants it to grow. So there are people out there that no growth. They don't want any growth. And I understand that. They want it to stay the same. We want to stay the same culture, the same roots that we have, but we also understand that growth is important.
We had a caller in the last hour, and I was listening to what she was talking about, and she was not happy about the new city hall that you're going to be moving into. But of course, we had some folks here from the school district the other day, and we've had to build new schools because the population got bigger, and that means you need more classrooms. That means you need more people to run those school buildings when you build new buildings. So as the city has grown, and I know there are people out there who don't want to see any increase in taxes, but you still have to pave roads. You still have to have firefighters. You still have to, as you pointed out to me, I think in the news break, water still has to come on when you turn on the tap.
Absolutely.
But
and things need to go away when you flush your toilet.
Right.
And those are services that we do, and that's our job. Our job is to do services. So we need the facilities to be able to do that. And if you look at our history of how conservative we've been in this city hall since, some will say like the 40s, or I'm not sure exactly. I know that we were at least in there in the 60s. And then, we've had to grow our services because the town has grown. The cities, we have more miles of streets that we have to pave and maintain and deal with. There's more water lines. There's just all these services that we need to provide. Our police department, the building that they're in, was built in the 70s, and it is beyond capacity. It's almost embarrassing. We need to have more space, but we do it in a conservative measure. We've bought other buildings, and right now our city staff are kind of splintered in different buildings. We want to put them in the same building. We want a city hall where there's synergy, where you come and pay your water bill at the same place that you can go and talk to somebody about weeds, or you can talk to the city manager right in the same building.
See, there are people though, despite the fact that you need more firefighters because the city grows. That means you need more space for firefighters and police officers and the like, and the water department grows because the city grows. But the argument, see, there's two different arguments, and before I even took this job, I can remember hearing about the differences. You got some people who thought you should have bought the Taj Mahal and moved in there and used it as a symbol of power, I guess.
Right.
And then you've got people who would just as soon have you meet on a street corner when you do city business. My impression was, and we were talking off air too as well, city government might be the most, and town government might be the most representative government people have because they can see you on a regular basis where they can't see a Mike Crapo every day.
Right.
I mean, they might see him once a year if they're at a fair or something and he's walking through. But you were, and I got to admit this, you were in a situation where it was not a win-win. It was a lose-lose no matter what you did.
Right.
People were going to be angry with you, and the caller in the last hour of the program is still incensed, apparently, that you're moving into a new building.
Sure, and that'll happen. I always say this: we have the chance of making 50% of the people mad and happy with every decision that we make, but we have to make decisions. We've been asked to make decisions. We've been elected into our positions to do that. We try to do what's best for the city, utilizing our own intellect and our own contacts and our own. We do a lot of public meetings. I don't know if you'll ever find a government more transparent, where you can watch us via the net anytime you want to. You can go back and look at old meetings. You can do all these things. And you're right, local government is the best form of government because you see us at coffee, you see us at breakfast, you see us out and about, and we're all part time. We're one of my friends calls us citizen soldiers. The government, the elected positions that we have, this is all part-time to us. We have a full-time staff. And so we have jobs in the community too. And believe me, I am at my job, people talk to me about what's happening in the city. And I think that's a great form of government because we see you, we look you eye to eye when we make decisions.
Maybe it's the time of year I've moved here. I got a question related to that. But 9:15 right now, 32 at our studios. Bill Colley with Mayor Don Hall from Twin Falls on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. The one area, though, that I have found that shocked me a little bit was coming out of, in fact, Fred Meyer yesterday, and I turned right, and there were craters the size of the moon on the street. Mm-hmm. And then downtown, there's a stretch of about a block where the road is almost grooved like you'd see out in the country on a dirt road. Is that weather related, or have we had an issue there trying to get these roads repaired?
Yeah, great question. Some of it's weather related, especially the potholes. When you have a rough winter, it just does its business on our roads. The grooving tends to be maybe heavier trucks generally what takes place. We have a plan now through a lot of effort in the last few years with city staff, city council talking about this, where we now have a schedule where we know every road in this city will be touched, maintained in one way or another every 8 years, because we know that if we have a cycle like that, that it's much cheaper, more cost effective to maintain a road than let it deteriorate to the point where we have to rebuild it. That costs a lot more money. So we've got this system in place that has taken us a while to put it in, but it's there. But you're always going to have potholes, and if there are bad ones, please let us know, because sometimes we don't know.
And we do have to point out, too, this goes back to that point that you cannot run a government without some money.
Yes.
And that I've been hearing these criticisms for the last few weeks that any road repair is going to cost money because you have to pay the people to do it, and you have to pay for the equipment, and you have to pay for the fuel to get there and back.
Right. Well, in the world, everything costs money. Have you maintained your car recently? I mean, if you've taken it in for an oil change or some kind of repair, it costs money. And it's no different with government. We have vehicles, we have employees. We want to treat our employees fair. We want the best employees we can get, because again, we are service. That's what we do. We serve people, and so we want the best people serving those people. So yeah, government costs money.
We have a caller with us, Mayor Don Hall, on the air with us on News Radio 1310 KLIX, and you're up next. What's your question or comment for the mayor?
Good morning. The roads. I've called in before. These roads are horrible around here. That brand new interstate out there, it's so rough, it's unreal. Blue Lakes, they patched it, but the patch only lasts about maybe a day, and it's like driving over speed bumps.
Yeah, when you're starting to talk about interstate, now I'm not trying to pass the buck here, but interstates, Blue Lakes actually is a state highway. That is under the Idaho Department of Transportation. They are to maintain those. But you're right, and we have more, our town is growing, we have more traffic. That means there needs to be more maintenance. All I can tell you is that we're doing our best to stay on top of those, do it efficiently. We've used different methods and materials to make sure that it's the most efficient that we can, saves money, more environmentally sound for the world. I mean, we look at all those things.
And he brings up a good question, a good point, though, when he referenced the state road like the interstate. A lot of people do call City Hall, and maybe we don't know if our street is necessarily a state road,
right,
or if we're even out on a county road, or if we're in the city. Is there an easy way that people could figure out who's really responsible for that road maintenance?
Well, sometimes it's a little difficult because we have highways going through our towns. The Seconds, for example, that's a state highway. Most of Blue Lakes North all of Blue Lakes North is a state highway. And so those are, but just call us. And that happens all the time, Bill. I had someone get a hold of me this weekend, and I responded to her where she was complaining about the cemeteries. Maybe because we had a windstorm, there was a lot of stuff down. She came down to honor her loved one, and it was kind of in shambles in the sense a lot of trees down or leaves down and those kind of things. Again, I attribute that really to the wind that we had. We had a pretty good windstorm. And so I reached out to her and said, I will contact the folks. We don't have anything. The city of Twin Falls has nothing to do with the cemeteries. It's all private in our community. But I still reached out, and our city staff will still reach out and try to put people in contact with the people that can help them.
I want to mention we've got another caller joining us, but it would be unfair to take the call unless they can get the question out quickly, and then we'll give them an answer on the other side of the break. It's coming up on 9:20, and you've got to make it quick. What's the question or comment you have for the mayor?
Okay, what I was going to say is just that what's happened is the federal government has been so bad about the way they do things that so when it leads down to the local and county government, and they are just leery about what they're doing. You know what I'm saying? And they do. I'm not against the spending either, but where they look at this federal government, how out of control it is.
Well, I'll tell you what, you're going to be able to hit that one out of the park in the next segment of the program. Send that guy a $5 bill. 20 minutes after 9 o'clock, Don Hall, Mayor of Twin Falls, in studio with us. He's going to be spending a bit more time with us coming up. I want to mention we have a guest joining us in the studio. Oops.
That was me. Sorry about that.
That's usually me.
Sorry.
About once a day I have paper in my hand and I end up batting the microphone with it. Actually, that was an earthquake, folks. But don't
be alarmed.
That was settled in California. We just felt the tremor. 9:24. You're listening to Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We're up to 32, so we've reached the freezing point. Twin Falls Mayor Don Hall joining me, Bill Colley, on the program this morning, and I believe we have another caller with us. We'll take this call, and then we'll get back to the previous callers at some point. And Colley, you're up next with the mayor, and I just want to say what's on your mind, and what would it be, a question or a comment?
Well, a comment and question both. You've put a new stoplight out on East Addison, and is there any plans for Twin Falls County? I know this is city, but being part of the City of Impact Zone, is there any plans to widen Addison out? I mean, as popular and as heavily traveled as that road is, and in the winter, since it is a county road, it receives no snow maintenance. I mean, that is the worst road to drive in Twin Falls County, that unless you've driven it, you just can't believe it. As far as icy in the winter, they clear Kimberly Road, which is state highway, but Addison Avenue being a county road, I wonder if there's any plans to do anything with it in the future. It is a definite hazard road. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that comment. You're right. It is a highway district, Twin Falls County Highway District road out there, and I would just say they're no different than we are. They're local folks that if you have some concerns, make sure that you relay that to them so that they can hear that. I don't know of any specific plan to widen Addison. I do know that we all look at traffic counts and we engage our state for funding and things like that to help us with some of these roads. And I don't know where that is on the queue as far as widening. I could certainly ask and get back to Bill so he can report that.
All right, I want to thank him for the telephone call. And if you'd like to reach the mayor this morning, 736-0300. That's 736-0300. Caller just before we had the break made a point, and I know you wanted to follow up on that.
Yeah, absolutely. His point was that because what we see on a national level, and maybe the inefficiencies with government and the deficit that is, folks, frankly, it scares me where we are as a nation with our deficit. It's unsustainable. So folks see that, and they see these national things, and it trickles down to the local level, and they start becoming very suspicious of local level too. And first thing I'm going to say is good. I want you to be suspicious of local level. I want you engaging us. I want you talking to us about how. I want you showing up to our city council meetings, especially when we go through our budget. When we are setting a budget to spend your money, it's your money. We want you there and to hear your comments and what your priorities are and the like. So. I would just say that I'm really proud of what we do. I'm proud of what our city staff and how conservative we are with your money. We're one of the only communities in the state of Idaho that has a foregone balance. Basically, what that means is we haven't gone and taken the amount of taxes that we could every year. We have foregone balance, and I want you to go out and research and see how many other communities have a foregone balance, because we are just so conservative. We try to spend your money wisely, but keep asking questions. Absolutely.
I think that people, when you bring that up, the number of people who actually show up at a council meeting is relatively small.
Very small.
And yet people, they have a lot on their minds, and when you're on the air, they like to sometimes get a lot off their chests. But what's your theory as to why they don't bother to show up?
Well, let's be honest. We are all busy. We have church involvement, family involvement, school involvement, all these things. And unless it's a controversial subject, will you come? Next week on the 19th, for example, we are going to be meeting. The URA is setting a meeting through their OTAC. They've hired a firm to help guide them on the downtown revitalization. It's 6 p.m. next Thursday at the Historic Ballroom. We want the community to come and make comments and guide us on that process. We need that because it's your community. But people are just busy. And generally they only come when it's a controversial subject, and we have to balance that. I was just talking to somebody in the hallway about this. We have to balance those showing up at the meeting and how passionate they are with really what we're hearing in the community as well, because generally people don't come to the meetings unless they're against whatever's there. I mean, it's just human nature. They don't come out and say, we really support this generally, because they just, it's a foregone issue for them, that we're going to pass it or whatever. And so we have to try to really balance that. And that's, again, why local government is so good, is because we hear from you. When I go to, believe me, I don't think I've ever had a lunch in this town that somebody didn't come and talk to me about an issue. And I asked for it. I asked to be elected. So and I think that's appropriate.
I worked many, many years ago in a city of comparable size. And I remember I would occasionally go out and have lunch with the mayor. And he had a same form of government. And we would sit down. And by the time we would get out of there 2 hours later, he must have met with about, a dozen constituents who'd come by, everything from cable to tree removal, sidewalks, you name it. And it was there. You'll spend a few more minutes with us.
I would love to.
Mayor Don Hall joining us from Twin Falls, Idaho today on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. The show is Top Story with Bill Colley, 32 at 9:30. We have a guest joining us in the studio. He's familiar, I think, to most people who are tuning in. Don Hall is the mayor of Twin Falls. My name is Bill Colley, and you're listening to Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And we've been chatting a little bit, taking some telephone calls from people as well on various issues. And if you'd like to reach the mayor in studio, you can dial us up at 736-0300. That's 736-0300. My email, I've been reading my email through the morning, but my email is, because it was inactive for a few minutes, has gone down. But you can email me. I'll try my best to get to that. It's bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com, and that last name is spelled Colley. We've been talking a little bit about infrastructure. As I was coming in and taking this job, though, that story about City Hall, I don't know how that got so incredibly whipped up into such a huge debate in the community, because it didn't seem to me to be a huge issue when I heard about it. But there were people who were so incredibly divided about it. It must have made the job a little difficult for several months dealing with all of that.
Sure. People are passionate about what they believe and what they think we should do, and we want them to be that way. And I always look at it this way. When I first toured the clinic building, that's 80,000 plus square feet. When I first toured it, I went, this might make sense, until I got into the details of it, saw how big it was, saw the infrastructure issues within its building. I mean, it's a wonderful building, but it was just too big. It would take care of our needs for 100 plus years. And I submit to you, 100 years is a little too far. And it might lead us to have to lease part of the building to different entities. And I don't believe government should be in the business of competing with the private sector in renting things. I don't think that's government's place, and we would become in competition. This is my view. When I first first started looking at the Banner building, I was against it. I thought, this old building doesn't make sense to me. Maybe there's some parking issues down here. But then when we drilled down deeper, saw that really we're just talking about the Banner building, its bones, how solid those old bones are, and what we could do with that building. And the parking is adequate, and we've had study after study stating that. And it's in the downtown core. And that's really important to me and to a lot of folks. It made sense to us. But, there were people on both those sides of that issue. The majority, obviously, within this committee were voted for the Banner building. And even some of those that didn't, they were just at the stage where they just needed more information. They weren't voting either way. They just needed more information.
And before we wrap up, I hear about a lot of these issues, as I say, as somebody who's walking into it after the fact. But I criticize government a lot. That's part of my job. But I also understand too that you've got to go home at the end of the day after you hear all this criticism, and you've got to deal with it. And it's sometimes a weight on your shoulders and all. Is there any way that you could make people in that situation, I guess, understand the decision And in other words, it doesn't look like there's ever going to be a consensus on some of this.
Right. Well, I think all you can do is try to educate. You try to give them the information, let them take that in, let them process it. They need to process it as well. I've had time to process that, okay, because I've looked at the details. And there are those that don't. When we first put this committee together for this example, there were people that needed to go through that process and understand and the square feet and what the space needs really are. And should we look 100 years out? I'm always say we need to look 30 to 50 years out. You start going to 100 years, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But because we don't even know what government will look like in 100 years, what the efficiencies might be and the manpower issues and all those kind of things. But we have a pretty good idea what's going to happen in 10 years. Okay. So I think just, and then we have to re-educate. And I don't mean that in a demeaning manner. People are just busy and they don't stay involved in these details. So we have to put that out. And that's why today's world is so good with our website. There's so much information on our website, and contact us and we can walk through these issues with you again. And I just call it a constant maintenance issue. I need to be maintained. I need to keep my knowledge up, and other people do too.
And again, the public always has that opportunity come election day to make a choice.
Absolutely.
And so far, the folks who are behind this decision are still on the job when it comes to the council. So I guess overall, there was some acceptance of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are going to be people that don't agree with it long after they've processed it. But, what we try to do is make the best decision for our community, what we think the majority of our community want. Okay, and through our public hearings and public testimony, that gives us a sense of that. But when the day is done, you've elected us to make decisions, and we need to make the decision.
Again, if people would like to reach your office too, fairly simple to do that. Just shoot an email down there.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely. My email comes to me, and I like this weekend, I was answering emails regarding potential city issues. They ended up not being, but we're always available.
All right, and just they can go to the website. Twin Falls website and find
see
it there.
Yeah, absolutely. And click on it and send me an email.
You can't hide from your government. 9:40. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Bill, for the invite.
Twin Falls Mayor Don Hall joining us on Top Story, News Radio 1310 KLIX, newsradio1310.com. Right now we have 34 at our studios, looking for a high somewhere in the 50s, and 20 minutes away from 10 o'clock. The mayor says, of course, he's on his way back to the office, but he says he's going to try to email us if he gets an early answer on Addison with some more details about that. And we can pass those along today. But if not today, we'll pass those along tomorrow. It's 9:44. Mike Huckabee is coming up in just a few minutes. Of course, the Huckabee Report is brought to you exclusively by the financial advisors at Waddell & Reed in Twin Falls. The telephone number is 736-6563. That's 736-6563. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. Tomorrow, I need to point out, it's always fun. Tomorrow, we have, of course, an opportunity to talk about some outdoor issues. Well, we talked about some outdoor issues a little bit earlier today with that came in from some of the sportsmen. But Kelton Hatch is scheduled to join us tomorrow, as he does on a monthly basis. And some of the things we're going to be talking about: big game season, setting meetings. Also, the fisheries scoping meetings. There has been some debate, we should point out, and I think it was a little more fierce than expected, about raising some of these fees for licensing for hunting and fishing. I thought that this was going to be one of those things that was going to, from the sound I got about a month ago, or at least some of the people I talked to, that this was going to sail through the legislature, but apparently it hasn't. There's some hang-ups there. The Hagerman Waterfowl closer scoping open house. Poached buck that we reported on here. In fact, Benito was all over that story. That happened, of course, right in the city limits. Turkey bear applications, hunter education classes. So all of those things with Kelton Hatch tomorrow coming in, talking with us from Fish and Game. So that's an opportunity, too, with Kelton in studio for you to ask some questions about some of those issues. And he's the man with all the answers. He probably won't like me saying that, but he's got a lot more answers on those issues than I could obviously provide for all of you. And so wanted to pitch that one out there. There's a story today on a separate topic, as we might say, and I happened to see this before I actually got on air, but it's been making some headlines. And because we are in an area that has really, Deseret never went away. The old state of Deseret country of Deseret, if you will, not only never went away, but it grew by leaps and bounds here in the West. And because of that, we have a huge population, and I always try to remember that we have to address issues that are important to some people in the community. We have a huge population, of course, of the LDS Church living in our immediate listening area. And they make me proud. I wish sometimes that my church would have some of the same, the teeth involved with enforcing doctrine and the like in various issues, because there are too many Nancy Pelosi's around in my church giving it a bad name, and she's allowed to generally continue to do that. But story on the AP Wire, a Mormon man who gained notoriety over the past decade for running a website that offers doubting Latter-day Saints a forum to chat has been kicked out. Sorry, I enjoyed that. It says he becomes the second high-profile church member to be excommunicated in the past year in what Mormon scholars consider to be the Utah-based faith's way of keeping dissenters in line. The church defines apostasy as repeatedly acting in clear public opposition to the faith. And when I hear people out there who complain and say, well, the church has to go my direction, well, wait a minute. What about the other several million people or tens of millions of people who may not agree with that? And if you don't agree with it, why are you under that roof? Why don't you go find a church? Because the funny thing is you drive down any highway in America any longer, and Christianity has been fraying into so many different churches over the years. You've got a choice. Somewhere, somehow, in the marketplace of faith, you've got a choice that you will find matches up with your belief system, instead of demanding that a church bend to your will. I drove across the country a couple of months ago, and I noticed that very much, that the options out there. There was a man writing from Liberty University in the late 1990s. He wrote a piece for Atlantic, and he was saying that if you think about it, since the early days, because there was Arianism and various different other people in the original church, and then it split. In there was an Eastern church and a Western church, and then we had the Reformation, and so new churches were born out of that. But this fellow was saying, and this was in the 1990s, late 1990s, so almost 20 years ago, he said because of that, and he's counting all of the independent churches you will find along the roadside, which are a denomination unto themselves, that we now have in excess of 1 million Christian congregations, denominations rather, around the world. Think about that for a moment. And this is only growing. The whole notion that someday we'll put it all back together into one, not going to happen, at least not in the next probably several hundred to a couple of thousand years, unless somebody comes down from heaven and says, well, wait a minute, all right, here's the new plan. And if that happens, that's likely going to be a very dark day. I shouldn't say that, though, because callers are admonishing me about not being optimistic enough on the air. But here's the thing. You've got choices. If you're unhappy with the church that you are in, leave. It's like any club you might be involved in. Go find another. It astounds me that people out there seem to think that, that everything has to be bent to their individual will. And if that be the case, all right, go find a church out in the woods of your own. You can be the one person, the one congregant there every weekend. And if you can find 2 or 3 other adherents, fine. People have been doing it forever. Huckabee is up next. Brought to you exclusively by the financial advisors at Waddell & Reed in Twin Falls, 736-6563. Thank you very much, Governor Reverend Mike Huckabee, joining us this morning. Just a few minutes left before we wrap up today's edition of Top Story. Bill Colley with you on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And, of course, if you've got any closing thoughts and you'd like to join me today, you can give me a jingle at 736-0300. That's 736-0300. Also, my email, I turned around during the break and I re-entered the password. It's back up and running. You can shoot me a line at bill.colley, that's Colley, bill.colley at townsquaremedia.com. Just going through some of my email, and somebody wrote and thanked me, and I want to thank them too for having the mayor drop by today. And we'll be seeing guests from the city a little bit more frequently in the coming months. Still trying to, I'd like to get some folks in here occasionally from county government as well, but I think I've got to drop by a meeting and actually walk in and just introduce myself and say hello to a few people there, and then we might get the ball rolling on that one. It's 9:55, and do want to point out we are looking for some warmer weather as the week progresses. The overnight lows that we had, it was chilly. When I was driving in this morning, I think the gauge on the dashboard of my Jeep said 29. And I've also found that that's fairly consistent with some of the bank thermometers, which when I was a kid growing up, bank thermometers were notoriously bad. Sometimes it was just the temperature of the bricks outside, and the bricks outside on a really sunny day would get a lot hotter than the actual air temperature, unless you were walking by the bricks and you could feel the heat radiating out of them. But I do know that that we've had a lot of changes in technology, and those bank thermometers, I often notice they're within a degree or two of what it reads on my dashboard. And as a coworker once told me, he said, what you're seeing on your dashboard is the temperature underneath your Jeep down on the road. Might be a good point to be made there too. So they may actually be more accurate when you're looking at that bank thermometer now than ever before. But driving in this morning, I thought, yeah, this is chilly, but it won't be as bad the remainder of the week. We're looking at some nicer weather, and overnight lows 10 to 12 degrees warmer than they happen to be today when you got up and you got out of bed and maybe had to scrape some frost from the windshields. A friend of mine who was a guest with us on the program about 2 weeks ago talking about the Shuttle Challenger disaster had some issues and had to go to an emergency room where he lives yesterday, where they had a major ice storm. And when he got there, he found himself standing in line for a very, 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 very long time because so many people had slipped on this thick ice that had fallen back on the East Coast that they had to all get in there and have some treatment done. So he probably had a worse time standing in line waiting than he did with the treatment that they gave him or whatever else followed. 9:57. I think about that because people all around the country have some issue with weather. For instance, you don't go to the Florida Keys in summer if you don't like humidity, and I'm not a humidity guy whatsoever. There's an old Rush Limbaugh line. When he first moved to New York City, he was living in an apartment, and he was explaining that it didn't have central air, and summer came along, and in big cities it gets hot in summer. And as Rush said, let me tell you something about big men. Big men sweat. So I've got absolutely no use for humidity. And if you're living in some parts of California, you've got the earthquakes to deal with. If you're living in some parts of the north, you've got all the snow to deal with. Not too bad around here when you actually consider all of the other factors we could be dealing with. Do want to point out Rush Limbaugh is coming up following news from Fox at 10 o'clock. And then Sean Hannity following news at 1 o'clock from Fox. Glenn Beck this afternoon. Glenn Beck following news at 4 o'clock. Do hope to see you tomorrow. God willing, and the creek don't rise, I'm back in this seat. And as I mentioned, Ken Menzel will join us from the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Department, as well as we'll have Kelton Hatch coming by talking with us about some fish and game issues too as well. Hope you can join us.